At this point, in all but two rich Western countries, there is a broad agreement that climate change is a real problem caused by humans and something needs to be done about it. This is a Canadian focus project, so this video will briefly talk about various Canadian political factions' suggestions for how to stop climate change. First is the Liberals, who are primarily in favor of carbon taxation, which this video will not detail too much as do not cannibalize the other parts of this project. But ultimately, the idea is to put a price on carbon emissions equal to that of the social cost of carbon that isn't reflected in individual decisions as to disincentivize people from purchasing CO2 emitting products or firms from emitting CO2 directly. In addition, the Liberals say they want to put forward a $3 billion initiative to plant 2 billion trees across Canada as a form of carbon capture, a few nebulous proposals for various forms of adaptation and climate disaster reform, and a pledge to put all revenues from the Trans Mountain Pipeline into clean energy projects. The rest of their climate proposals are various forms of subsidies to electric vehicles and clean energy. The Conservatives, by contrast, scoff at the idea of carbon taxation having any effects on emissions. Their first priority is getting rid of it and promoting the Canadian oil industry in Alberta. Their climate plan is secondary to that. That being said, they still do have one, and here's a quick rundown of all the pieces in it. There will be caps determined by the federal government placed on how much individual firms can emit. If they go over that, they must invest some amount of money on green technology efforts. There will be a certification board, also directly controlled by the federal government, determining what counts as a green investment. There will be $1 billion in subsidies for green technology, a ban on exporting plastic waste, federal control over Canadian plastic waste regulations in general, and finally a series of protectionist moves to promote Canadian energy because they believe said Canadian energy will be more environmentally healthy than the average worldwide, and as such exporting it does good for the environment. Third is the NDP. They would keep carbon taxation, but mix it in with a series of proposals that attempt to merge environmentalism with a social democratic view of economic justice, creating a Canadian climate bank to invest in various energy projects that are mandated to be unionized jobs, national efforts towards free public transit, and banning things like single-use plastics nationwide. A lot of it is similar to the Conservative plan, just without getting rid of carbon taxation and with labor and indigenous activism parts added on. Finally, the Green Party. They deserve some special attention for their plan due to being a primarily environmentalist party. So, despite their small seat count, they get a look. They support carbon taxation, though they would like to raise it, and are willing to go direct rule from Ottawa on a lot of things to stop climate change in Canada. Totally banning the construction of any new coal or natural gas extraction, total ban on fracking regardless of whether it is new or not, spend $10+ billion on a national green electric grid program, completely banning gasoline-powered cars by 2030, spend a similarly large amount of money to the NDP on public transport, tax fuel used by international shipping, transportation, whether by boat or plane when it gets into Canada, transition to ditching nitrogen fixing for agriculture entirely, and finally, massively expanding the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to only cover non-profit or government projects and to spend a ton on, well, green infrastructure projects. They have a series of economic proposals that they say are part of adapting to a green economy, but they're really just boilerplate Bernie Sanders / Jeremy Corbyn type left-wing policies that would take a while to really talk about and had little to do with the climate change. It's worth mentioning the Green New Deal, a plan that started in the United States that is very similar to the one proposed by the Green Party, though perhaps even more economically left-wing. It has a job guarantee in it. It's gained some support around the left of the Democratic Party, though I doubt when asked on each individual proposal of it that most of the politicians who say they support it would agree. It's more signaling to the environmentalist crowd than anything. There have been some attempts to get a Canadian Green New Deal type of movement going within the NDP, urged on somewhat by the journalist Naomi Klein, who has been a key figure in leftist Canadian political discourse for as long as I have been alive. It's on the periphery of actual policy, so I won't go into detail on it. It's just worth mentioning. That's it. This is a fairly short video, but it's necessary to get all the ideas down for further parts of this project that explore various ideas in more detail in a more opinionated manner. All the sources for this video are just the respective party platforms or the Green New Deal as written up by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez itself for its contents.